Hi, guys. Welcome to Synchro Mystic episode 16. I'm Wayne McCroy. This is Richard Willett. Together, we're taking on the big machine, essentially. That's what it's turned into. This whole death cult ideology has developed into something that's kind of an artificial thing of its own, a sort of egregore, if you would. What do you think, Richard? How are you doing today, my friend? Always a pleasure to speak to you. And where do we want to steer this conversation today? Because we have a lot to discuss. Many things happen in between our recordings of these episodes. So there's always a world of details to go through.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes us a couple of weeks to have not new topics to talk about, but to go away and investigate this stuff properly and find common aspects to talk about. So why it's every couple of weeks, one, we're both busy dads running around like maniacs, but also having the understanding. We don't want to come to you without the understanding ourselves and give it to you. So this week we're going to talk about what some describe as the omega point, the singularity, or the divergence point, which is what I'm doing. I'm looking into this week, and this comes down to the fact that there seems to be this is there's two roads going here, but I think both roads lead to Rome anyway. And something I'd like to talk about later is human plus versus human enhancement. He-Man, basically. He-Man. He-Man is the human advancement. And they always tell you when you're a kid, you just don't know what you're looking at. There was lizards in that as well, lizard people. Um, so there is two types there. One I think is the soft cell. One is the hard cell. The Ray Kurzweils will talk about human plus. The Elon Musk will talk about human advancement. And I think that both lead to the same thing in a hierarchy. But this goes back at least, well, this goes back thousands of years. We know that. But in terms of even the technology, I think they knew this stuff was coming about. I think they know what's coming back for the next 100 years, because they already have it. But things like that, people like the Jesuit priests were talking about, and you'll be speaking about the other counterpoint to that today. But this is, we know it's alchemical, we know it's synchromistic, we know these are old principles being used through technology now, but they are telling you, are they not? The omega point is a point when everything comes together, but it sounds beautiful. But what it means is losing your individual nature. There's always a price to pay, isn't there, Wayne?
Certainly. And didn't they make a movie called The Omega Man? Did
Yep.
you remember that? I think it's the same basic concept as the Omega point, too. But even Led Zeppelin told us there's two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on. So we do have these different paths we can take. And here's the key to all of it. It's an individual choice for each one of us. We don't have to go along with their program. And that's the good news. So we can choose the path we want. And essentially what this boils down to in this coming time frame we're looking at is we're going to have options. We're going to have choices we need to make. But essentially, there's two basic choices to choose from. You can go down the path of hypermaterialism, or you could take the spiritual path. And we need to each individually make that choice. And that's what this whole omega point notion is all about. Now, the transhumanists refer to this omega point as the singularity. And there's a lot of different ideologies that stem from this whole thing. And of course, the gentleman who wrote that book about the omega point and coined the phrase about it was a Jesuit. So he was trained in many of these mystery school ideologies and teachings. And he put this down, and it seems to me that he is for steering people into the hyper materialist paradigm. So we have that choice being given to us and proffered to us from the people who have largely taken control in this world. And that's where they want to steer us. And we've talked about this in the past here, Richard. This is the world of shells. It's the world of hyper materialism. It's all about separating out the spiritual component of man and going in that direction. So you have that option. Of course, you had other people from other organizations and different teachings or schools of thought talking about taking the spiritual path. And one of those people was Rudolph Steiner. And we're going to get into the distinction between these two perspectives on things and understand that ultimately what these guys are telling you is true to a degree, but you have to make the choice. You have to go either into that hyper materialist paradigm, which in my view is a bad choice, stifles the human condition and the evolution of humanity in a spiritual sense. You could go down that road, or you could choose the spiritual path, which is actually the path where you prosper more in the long term and where we are supposed to go, really, by the divine design in this place. So you're supposed to choose the spiritual path, but there will be those that choose this materialist path or the hyper materialist path that's been presented by this Jesuit gentleman who wrote this Omega Point book, and we could choose that direction. So, what that hyper materialist paradigm looks like, this is the transhumanist notion of things. This is the collective hive mind. This is the digitization of human consciousness. This is all of those things that we describe as a panopticon control grid. Now, some people, for some reason or another, they see the benefits of that as desirable and they want to go down that path. And there are some people who very much think that this transhumanist future is going to be a good thing, that this world of shells they're building will be a good thing. And I don't see it that way. And this is a difference in perspective, certainly. But the thing is, there's a lot of folks who have already begun to separate themselves from spiritual concerns. And the uncomfortable truth is, at the highest, most levels of the power structure of this world, the people that are pushing this transhumanist paradigm, they don't want to have to face a higher power and be answerable to a higher power for the things they've done. So they want to build out their own immortality here in the physical world. And that's what they're attempting to do with this. So it's all about this connection back to source, back to God, the spiritual concern of things. And which way are you going to go with this? Do you want to completely divide yourself from that? Or do you want to have a relationship with that, have communion with that, have reconciliation with that divine source? And this is wherein the question comes in: which path do we choose? And each of us has to make that individual choice. And some have already made that choice. And we see some of the ramifications of things happening today. So there's this big split in humanity that's coming. And a lot of this stuff has been described ad nauseum by many of the occult fraternities like the Rosicrucians and things like that. And it's been actually shown to us in science fiction, where we're going to have this split in humanity, and there will be two different distinct kinds of human beings in the future. And of course, they always seem to try to represent these two kinds of human beings in a specific light. And I would point to H.G. Wells' The Time Machine to give you the distinction of this. There's two different classes of humans. The one were called Morlocks, if I'm not mistaken, and they were animalistic and primitive, and they were zombie-like, and they were violent, and they lived on the surface. And then there were the ones that lived below the surface, that were the intelligent ones, that had advanced technologies and things like that. This is if memory serves me correctly with the story, but this is what's presented to people. So they're saying that this transhumanist bunch will be the ones that evolve to the next level, and that the rest, those who are bitter clingers, remember when Obama said that, to their religion and their guns and stuff like that. This is what he was talking about. He calls them bitter clingers. And this is the way that fiction, science fiction, has always tried to represent this to people's minds as far as the archetype. They want you to think that if you choose the spiritual path, that you're somehow inferior or that you're backwards. And they have it twisted and inverted and convoluted when it comes down to the true nature of all of it. But they want you to believe that it's the transhumanist bunch, the ones that are going to advance and move on. And then those who cling to the spiritual concerns will become animalistic and will be this kind of subhuman type race. And that's the way they always try to pivot these things in the popular mindset. So, of course, there's a lot of other aspects to this to discuss, Richard, and I'd like to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah, the point. I mean, that was a great way of setting it up as well, because it does get kind of convoluted. But let's just go to, that's the Y point. That's the axis point. So just picture it in your mind as a Y. So it's the top. It's the split between the Y. Now that's just two paths, as you say, spiritual path and the materialistic path. Now down that materialistic path, which the likes of Elon Musk, Ray Kurzweil, all of these Silicon Valley guys have already gone, there's another split within that Y, in that path, that splits off between human plus and human enhancement. Now they're down the same path already. Now they're trying to sell you that as the choice without telling you that you've already, if you've gone that way, decided to go around that path and avoid the spiritual path. Now this guy, so this is the guy you were talking about, Telhard Ditardin, and he's the future of man. He was a Jesuit priest. And this is what he says, how he tries to reframe it from what Wayne just said there as the inversion, the satanic inversion. So he's trying to say that the technological side, and this was written in the early 1900s, is the opposite. That's the spiritual path, because that's the natural evolution, because it brings us together as a or one, the hive mind. What he's trying to disparage is individuality. They're saying you're running away from God. You're running away from us all. You're deceiving yourself. It's the inversion. Instead of, he talks about individuality, individual mind as selfish and self-centered. All of these things that you hear, and it even comes down to things like some of the words like sin. And we'll have a look at that later. What that means in Phoenician. It's the letter X, 22nd letter of the alphabet. It's the crossroads, as Wayne keeps saying. It's the sin. The sin there is to choose the path they don't want you to choose on that crossroads, which is individual. They don't want you as an individual. So let me just read this bit. This is from the Future of Man by this Jesuit priest. And I just want to read this little bit and see what, Wayne, what you think of this. So this says, it's in the grand option, the chapter. So there is no way out. If we wish to safeguard the preeminence of the spirit, again, it's inversion, except by taking the one road that remains to us, which leads to the preservation and further advancement of consciousness, the road of unification. It's the inversion. A convergent world, whatever sacrifice or freedom it may seem to demand of us, taking away, that's your price to pay, is the only one which can preserve the dignity and aspirations of the living being. Talking about you doing your part of the greater good, the human evolution. You are a part in this evolution. Do your bit. Shut your mouth. Don't think about your own wants and needs. Therefore, it must be true. If we are to avoid total anarchy, again, exactly what Wayne's saying, you are beasts, you are animals, the source and the sign of the universal death, we can do no other than plunge resolutely forward, even though something in us perishes, into the melting pot of socialization. Though something in us perishes, but where is it written that he who loses his soul shall have it, or shall save it? It's the inversion. They're telling you the exact inversion. Your individuality doesn't mean you're separate from whatever God you believe in. It means that you're in communication with and you're an outgrowth of. They want you to lose that and disappear into the nothingness. So
Into
you're
the
controlled.
melting pot, right?
It's a melting pot. And this is in a book by a Jesuit that was out in the early 1900s. And what I wanted to, the chap that you mentioned earlier, I can't remember his name now, it's gone off the top of my head.
Rudolph Steiner.
Rudolph Steiner. Why do so many people have a problem, especially that I can see in Christian faith, have a problem with the likes of Rudolph Steiner? Why do they have an issue with that? Why? And you're far more knowledgeable on that, because some people will look at that and go, "Why are you reading him? It's paganism and all of this stuff."
Well, I think it's that all stems from an inherent misunderstanding of who Steiner was and what he was actually trying to do. Now,
Hmm.
Steiner was a student of Rosicrucianism and also of theosophy. He was a theosophist, and he had actually split with the theosophists at one point because he began to notice a bit of the discrepancies and the misteachings that they were putting forward in the Theosophical Society and in the Theosophical movement. And he took umbrage with many of the things they were saying. So he went and he formed his own organization called Anthroposophy. I don't know if I could pronounce that right. Anthroposophy, that's how it's pronounced. So he formed his own set of teachings based upon some of the things that he garnered from the good bits of information from Rosicrucianism and from theosophy and from all the other angles that this secret doctrine comes from. And he was able to tell us some things about that based upon some of his own experiences, his own searching into what he called soul science and finding answers in the spiritual. And he was giving us a warning, and he kind of split with these groups and came out and put together some lectures and started teaching people about some of the spiritual truths that were happening. And he gave us a warning. He gave us many warnings about things that were coming in the future. And he was extremely troubled by the onset of World War I, which was known as the Great War at the time. And he saw this as being a reflection of something that happened in the spiritual realms just prior to that. And he told us about that because he claimed to have had a type of insight into this through the soul science side of things. So, according to Steiner, what had happened is starting in the year 1841 up until November of 1879, there was a war that happened in the spiritual realms just adjacent here to our realm here in the earth. And this is represented in his view in the symbolism that is caught up in the archangel Michael battling the dragon. And in this battle, which lasted 38 years from 1941 until November of 1841, I said 1941, that's a mistake, 1841 to 1879, the Archangel Michael won this battle, and the dragon, which was representative of what he called the forces of Ahriman, or the Ahrimanic spirits or forces, at that point in 1879, they were cast down to earth. Now, what does this mean? This means that after this spiritual battle happened in this adjacent spiritual realm here, they were cast down to earth, and that would be in the etheric portion of the earth. So, the etheric portion, now a lot of this falls back on, you have to know a little something about the Rosicrucian cosmo-conception to understand this a
Yeah,
little better. And I know, Richard, you've been working on reading that one now too.
it's a
So
difficult one.
it is.
It's a
It,
difficult one, but yeah.
it's worth it though. It's one you have to go through multiple times to understand the levels of meaning. So the Rosicrucians describe the physical world in which we live in terms of we live and we experience everything, and our five senses exist in what they call the dense chemical region of physicality. Now, there are higher or finer layers of this physical realm called the etheric portion of this. And they describe this in their Rosicrucian cosmo-conception. So these forces, these Ahrimanic forces, were cast out into the etheric. And what these Ahrimanic forces do is they influence the human mind, the human brain. And they've been here since 1879 now, according to Rudolph Steiner. And what they do is they steer people into this hyper-materialist paradigm. They steer people towards materialism. They steer science towards material science as we see today. So it's all based in the five basic senses that we have in this place. And it's all based in this dense chemical region. All the teachings and the thought forms and everything that influence us from these Ahrimanic forces are based in pushing us towards that materialism, towards that materialist paradigm. So what has happened here, according to Steiner, is at one point prior to this advent that happened in 1879 where they were cast down, these Ahrimanic forces existed in the spiritual realms. Now you could think of this in terms of, say, something closer to the astral realm rather than the etheric. So they were cast out of the astral into the etheric. This is how I try to reference it for people, if you follow along, if you know a little something. And we may have to go deeper at some point with some of these teachings as to how these different layers of invisible worlds commingle and penetrate each other. So they were cast out of the astral into the etheric, but prior to that, they existed in this astral form or in this other spiritual realm, and they actually performed a specific function there. And their function had to do with physicality. with providing something for physicality. Now, what this is what they call the bloodlines, or the racial portion of this, the nationalities, these different spirits of times past, wherein, according to Steiner, during certain portions of man's evolution, his spiritual evolution, he needed to have this kind of a mindset of tribalism, where they were divided based upon genetic or heritable traits, where the different functions of society, different cultures in society had different places based upon their heredity. And this is where we get a lot of these racial differences and stuff like that from. And this was something that was to help man to develop here in the physical, to have a vehicle for moving forward to the next step of evolution. So what happened, according to Steiner, come 1879, when these Ahrimanic forces were cast out of the spiritual and down here into the physical, a reverse order of things took place, because up until that point, up until this war in the heavens in 1841, from 1841 to 1879, the Ahrimanic spirits and their close akin cousins, the Luciferian spirits, their function was to help man's evolution develop in the physical. So what had happened there at the end of that point, now we have advanced as far into materialism as is possible at the end of that point in 1879. And now we're supposed to be on the higher path, moving back towards the spiritual. So what happened is the jobs of these spirits, they inverted themselves at that point, because it was a good thing for human evolution up until that point to have these divided cultures in the world, to have this diversity in the world, in as far as that goes. And we all had these distinct traits that helped the whole race of humanity to develop. Now, this is according to Steiner, and I always caution people, you take this stuff with a grain of salt. You don't have to believe it. You could think it's total hokum if you want, but understand there's people in positions of power in this world that very much believe in these things, and the things they do to act upon their beliefs affect all of us. So what happened is we had all of these racial differences, all of these differences in physical traits that came about. And this was to help further the advancement of humanity, of the evolution of mankind through the various ages here. And a transfer point took place in 1879 at the end of this war in heaven, wherein the direction is different now. We're supposed to be going on this spiritual path. We're supposed to get back to a more spiritualized type of humanity, wherein we have that connection with source, with God, and we advance in our sciences and in our knowledge and everything in the spiritual concurrently with the physical knowledge. But now what's happened is, because their function inverted, because these Ahrimanic spirits, as described by Rudolph Steiner, are what he called, and forgive the term if it offends anybody, he called them retarded angels. And that's essentially what they've become. Their progress had become retarded. They got stuck. So they are no longer going to evolve to the next step. Everything evolves in this system, if you understand the Rosicrucians. So these angelic forces that exist, they were supposed to evolve to the next step, but some of them got stuck. And these ones that got stuck are referred to as the Ahrimanic forces. So what they seek to do then is they want to indwell in humanity. And they influence our thoughts and our actions here. They are present now. They've been present since 1879. And you can't deny that they're here. And ignoring them doesn't make them go away. That just gives them more power and influence over people. And that's why they've kept a lot of these notions hidden from people. So you have that Ahrimanic influence here. But what it essentially is it's spiritual entities that exist in a somewhat etheric form, that want to indwell humanity and exist here and build this world of shells, this hypermaterialist paradigm, this transhumanist paradigm. They want to manifest and be able to manifest in the dense physical chemical region in human forms. And that's what they're working towards. But what this does is this stagnates or stifles the evolutionary process of man in the spiritual sense. So what this really does is this causes an exchange to take place. The human spirit and the spirit of these Ahrimanic influences essentially will swap places when and if they're able to build this world of shells so that they can manifest physically here and exist here. And then the human spirit will be trapped in that nether region. And this is something that the Rosicrucians had warned against. This all has to do with the evolutionary process, according to Rosicrucianism. And I hope I'm not explaining this in a confusing way for people. I'm trying my best to impart these ideas to people without all the background knowledge of this. So, this is what Steiner claims, that these Ahrimanic spirits are here now. They're influencing mankind. They've been here. They're trying to build this hyper-materialist paradigm. They're trying to convince man to step into that hyper-materialist path, that path of transhumanism, and separate from the spiritual side of things. And their function has now become inverted, and they're pushing people away from the evolutionary process, where in the past they were pushing people into the evolutionary path, the process, the correct process from outside, from the spiritual realms. Now they're acting from within and actively pushing people outward away from the spiritual path. So I hope this makes sense. So it's an inversion. It's all taken place at this time, and it's all a necessary step here because we do have the gift of free will from our Creator. So we have that choice to make, but we need to understand and recognize there are spiritual influences here that are affecting people's decision making skills, that are affecting people's worldview and perspective. And what these Ahrimanic forces want is for people to accept that this physical reality is all that there is, that there's nothing more than this world we can sense with our five senses, and anything beyond that could be explained away as some physical cause and effect sequence. And I think we've talked on this before, where they want us to believe that consciousness is nothing more than the byproduct of the electrochemical activity of the brain and brainstem. And if that's true, that's a big if, then what happens is they could transfer your consciousness into a machine and you can live forever in the machine, according to them, if that is true. So this is where they're trying to steer and direct things. They want us to believe in this hyper materialist paradigm way of thinking, this scientific or scientism viewpoint of the world. And this benefits these Ahrimanic forces for people to think in that way and not acknowledge that there's a spiritual component to it, because then they can more actively indwell in the human being undetected and build this world of shells while quietly the spirit of man suffers in the process. So this is what's attempting to be done. And this is the perspective Steiner offers. Now, there are those on the other side, like the Jesuits, and I always contrast these things in this way. You have factions within this higher power group that runs things in this world, these secret schools, wherein they most certainly have infighting among them as to who's going to control things and steer things and which way they want to go. So you have the Jesuit side and you have the other side here, usually represented by the Freemasons or the Rosicrucians or some such thing. They're all the same groups at the topmost levels, but they have a difference of opinion as to which way to go. And you do have those people within both sides of these factions that want to progress spiritually, and you have on both sides of these factions those that want to progress physically, where they think this whole transhumanist thing is the answer, and you have ones that think that it's the opposite of the answer, and they're warning against this. So we have all of this, and we are handed these viewpoints because we each need to make that individual decision. Are we going to go the spiritual path, or are we going to go the hyper materialist physical path? And that's where our modern science and all of these ideas are leading us. And this is why those dark occultists who run things at the top of the power structure have been hiding this information from us, because it benefits these Ahrimanic forces. If you don't know about them, you don't think they exist, or you think this is all hokum, this benefits them. So it's only by being aware that there is this spiritual presence behind it that you can begin to actually focus back on that spiritual path and maybe counter this to some degree. So these Ahrimanic forces are working feverishly towards this, and this is the spiritual side of transhumanism, and it's something that most people aren't going to touch with a 10-foot pole, but we're not afraid to talk about it here, are we, Richard?
No, we're not, and it's fascinating because it provides clarity. And the thing that I kind of I get from all this is the common denominators and the overlapping between these belief systems. They're all, if you strip away the names and the terminology, what you're getting here is very basic level is a hierarchy. One of them believes that the base hierarchy of materialistic is the goal. Others believe getting out of the base materialistic and completely ignoring it and disappearing elsewhere is also the goal. But somewhere in between that may be the point of balance. So when you go to the Kabbalistic stuff, you look at Malkut, which is the lowest level of the tree of life. That's the solidity material world. And that's deemed a bad thing in the Kabbalah. But if you look in the terms of what you're saying there, what would be better than having a world of shells if the shells were created here and they convinced you the best thing to do is vacate your shell once you've created it. So they actually do work hand in hand. The alchemical, you can see the mixing pot of all of this stuff. And you look into the Gnostic stuff, this place is a trap. We need to escape this trap. This is a materialistic world. That kind of plays into it as well. I'm not saying these are bad things. I'm not saying these are bad people. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it seems to be if we can pick apart these common denominators between these different belief systems, the actual end result seems to be the same, leaving this world to someone else, but the actual vessel of what we existing as something other than what a human soul could actually inhabit. So that's why it's a death cult because you're not only
Exactly.
dying, yeah, you're not actually dying, not only dying here, you're deleting what it becomes to be human once you get here, if you can get here at all. So that's the death of humanity because you become something else, a human enhanced HE, or you become human plus. You're not human anymore. So once you come here, so that's the death of humanity. Or the other part of the death cult is let's get out of here. It's a trap. That's part of a death cult as well. All it really means is that they want this place for themselves. The Jewish faith call this is what doesn't make sense, and that's what I think of people of the Messianic Jewish faith and those who are of the more orthodox. Well, they are orthodox, but the more kind of traditional Jewish faith kind of find it confusing because you're saying this place, Malkut, this physical earth is the bad place to be, but you're also trying to get all the riches and all the gold and all of the materialistic wealth for yourself. And in the singularity and in terms of technology, you're trying to stay here forever. So the confusion is sown within amongst them. So it's supposed to be confusing. At the very top, they'll look at all of these things and see the melting pot of confusing concepts and ideologies. But the best way to put it is what goes up must come down. There's an influx and an outflux. Doesn't matter what you call the levels. They feel that they want to take over this place and get rid of us who disappear somewhere else, but they don't want you to feel like you are actually going free. They would like you to be trapped here and help them build the system while they can. And they just want you to die because they don't know what's happening after death. No one really does for sure. But they want you to trick you into thinking either you're going to top yourself, and that's a good thing because you're escaping, or you're going to help them build this place to stay forever because you're going to hell afterwards. They don't, they try and put blockades at every point, and it's a really hard concept to understand because we are taught to think good and bad, black and white. And we talked about that, okay, this road is good road, that road is bad road. And I think that's really where we fall down is that you can turn around and walk the other way, walk away from all of this toss and just go with what your heart says and says all of that's manipulation. I just want to, I don't know what's going on and I'm happy with that. I can actually just don't have to walk through any path. I don't have to go up that path. I don't have to go up that path. I can stay here and enjoy myself, or I can just look around me for a little while. But they want to manipulate your energy to do something with it because they can't. And this is the archontic thing. They can't create or do anything of their own. So they need to manipulate you to be the hands and the creator of their demonic plan, whichever way that seems. And this is why it's a chess game, because whatever way you turn, they're checkmating you because you're on their board. The only thing you can do is say, I ain't playing that game. I ain't getting there because
Exactly.
I don't trust you. I'm not playing your game. And that's the only thing you can do. You can't win that game because they're changing the rules as it goes. They own the chessboard. Tell them to sod off. I'm not playing. You don't, and that's all I can kind of say is that's the more you read this stuff, like this stuff, it's fascinating to read, absolutely fascinating to read. But if you take it as gospel, literally, then you will become so bloody confused and disenchanted that you will lose your life in your own mind, going, I don't know what any of this means. Neither do they.
Right. And that's one of the big things. There's a lot of people out there, especially in the occult, that pretend to know something that you don't. And this is one of their keys to maintaining
Yeah.
power. They dangle that carrot before you, this occult knowledge, this special knowledge, this gnosis. That's another proper term for it that they like to use. And they dangle that before you and make you believe that they know something you don't, and therefore they have some power over you. That's one of the biggest manipulation tools that there is, and that's one of the biggest mind control tools that they have in their arsenal to use against us. But I would like to get back on the whole thing here, and I'm actually going to read some of Steiner's words from one of his lectures here, just to give people a little more context into this notion of these Ahrimanic forces. So he says, the spirits of darkness are now among us. We have to be on guard so that we may realize what is happening when we encounter them and gain a real idea of where they are to be found. The most dangerous thing you can do in the immediate future will be to give yourself up unconsciously to the influences which are definitely present. For it makes no difference to their reality whether they are recognized or unrecognized. It will be the main concern of these spirits of darkness to bring confusion into the rightful elements which are now spreading on earth and need to spread in such a way that the spirits of light can continue to be active in them. They will seek to push these in the wrong direction. I have already spoken of such wrong direction, which is as paradoxical as is possible. I have pointed out that while human bodies will develop in such a way that certain spiritualities can find room in them, the materialistic bent, which will spread more and more under the guidance of the spirits of darkness, will work against this and combat it by physical means. I have told you that the spirits of darkness are going to inspire their human hosts, in whom they will be dwelling, to find a vaccine that will drive all inclination towards spirituality out of people's souls when they are still very young, and this will happen in a roundabout way through the living body. Today, bodies are vaccinated against one thing and another. In the future, children will be vaccinated with a substance which it will certainly be possible to produce, and this will make them immune so that they do not develop foolish inclinations connected with spiritual life. Foolish here, of course, in the eyes of the materialists. A beginning has already been made, though only in the literary field where it is less harmful. And of course, since Steiner wrote this, this wasn't just in the literary field. They're doing this now with these vaccines. There's more here. Let me skip down a little bit. Give me 1 second. All right. As he said, these are the beginnings in the field. The beginnings of this happened in the field of literature. The whole trend goes in a direction where a way will finally be found to vaccinate bodies so that these bodies will not allow the inclination towards spiritual ideas to develop. And all their lives, people will believe only in the physical world they perceive with the senses. Out of impulses which the medical profession gained from presumption, oh, I beg your pardon, from the consumption they themselves suffered. People are now vaccinated against consumption, and in the same way, they will be vaccinated against any inclinations towards spirituality. This is merely to give you a particularly striking example of many things which will come in the near and more distant future in this field, the aim being to bring confusion into the impulses which want to stream down to earth after the victory of the spirits of light. So there you go. And I can't emphasize this enough. Rudolph Steiner warned us about this. This is a lecture that he gave on October 27th, 1917, in Dornach, the town of Dornach.
So they said that at the end that door knock. Really, yeah. So they said at the very end you ended that with the victory of the spirits of light. But that would feel, is that really the victory of the spirits of the dark?
Well, he was
You
speaking the victory of the spirits of light as far as this advancement of humanity in this on the spiritual side of things. So ultimately, what he's been teaching and what he believed is that ultimately the good side's going to win, and that man will advance spiritually and evolve spiritually, but there's going to be this leftover portion that stays behind, and you see this mirrored in Christian theology, the left behind, those that are left
Mm.
behind. And this, in order to understand better, you have to know a little something more about the Rosicrucian cosmo-conception and what it is they believe about these functions of evolution or the evolutionary path. So what happens is you will have a remnant that gets stuck here. They'll be sort of akin to what happened in the spiritual realm, according to Steiner, with these Ahrimanic spirits. You see, they are what's called retarded angels. Their development and their growth and their evolution cycle was retarded. They're stuck. And that's what's going to happen to those on the human path here that don't get on that spiritual side of it, that don't pursue the spiritual side. Their growth will be retarded and they will be stuck in this hyper materialist physical paradigm, the world of shells. And that's what's essentially being presented here. So that's the whole point. And then this creates a divergence or a separation in the reality. And when you look at the Rosicrucian cosmo conception, they say ultimately what happens when you have this evolutionary cycle or process taking place, when you have one group that's development has been retarded or hindered, that splits off and becomes a separate thing. And this is the importance of why the Earth has a moon and why planets that have a moon show a divergence or a splitting in their evolutionary cycle. This is what they say in the Rosicrucian cosmo conception. Now, in order to better understand this, I think maybe one day we'll have to do a long term talk about what it is that the Rosicrucian belief system tells us about how the world truly operates and what these cycles of evolution look like and what the nature of reality is, because according to them the earth was once one with the sun at one point in its evolutionary process. And this aligns with a lot of biblical scripture and stuff as well, because you see, in the beginning, there was light, but there was no sun at that point. The sun was created later,
mm.
according to the Genesis description in the Bible. So, according to the Rosicrucians, the earth was once merged with the sun, it was one and the same, and then when the evolutionary paths diverted in the same way, such as what we're seeing here, the earth split off and became its own separate thing. So this is part of the cycles of what they say. And when there's a moon present, they say that's because there's a divergence in the evolutionary cycle, and that there are certain spirits that have been stifled in their growth attached to that moon from the main body that it's come from. So this
Right.
is an important concept to them, and you can see a lot of this symbolic reference in movies and stuff like the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, and this is a classic film for some of these mystery school teachings and stuff like that, because there's so much symbology that was present there that you could see from this, and how eventually the world itself or a planet can become a sun. And this gives kind of the whole direction for this Rosicrucian conception, what it is that they believe, that the life stems from the sun, and then when you split off and you have some of this stagnation of development of evolutionary processes, then you have other bodies present. But at some point, when the spiritual evolution takes place, that world becomes a new sun. And that's what happened in the movie 2001. The Jupiter became a second sun in the solar system. You
Mm.
remember that?
Yeah.
And this all derives from these mystery school teachings. It's the same thing. And according to them, the next phase in human evolution is called the Jupiter revolution here, is what we're going to see. That's the next phase, Jupiter. So That's why they represent these things in those archetypes in that way, in those films and things like that. So there's a lot here, and I hope I'm not losing people, because this requires an awful lot of background knowledge about what it is that these secret schools teach. And like I said, we may have to do a program one day just touching on the Rosicrucian cosmo conception, because so much of what's happening in the world today is based upon that. And like I always tell people, whether you believe it or not, it's irrelevant. They believe it, and if they believe it and they're acting on it, you better understand it. So that's why we're putting this out. And like I said, most people aren't going to touch any of this stuff with a 10-foot pole, but we're not
Mm.
afraid to talk about it here.
Well, we did the son of sorry, the father of Jupiter was Saturn, obviously. So we have that chronology coming on. He was the one, I believe, he was the one. Who's the one that survived? It would be Jupiter, wouldn't it? That survived Saturn eating all his children.
Yeah, that's there's a whole lot there, and I think we discussed some of the mythology of all of it in the past. Of course, in the book 2001, written by Arthur C. Clarke,
Mm.
he chose the planet Saturn
Yeah.
to be the one. Whereas, I guess, according to the mainstream narrative as to why that Kubrick chose Jupiter, it was easier to produce on film because he didn't think he could pull off the rings of Saturn on the film properly. That's the official reason, but there's other reasons, and it all ties back to all this occult stuff that we're talking about. And most people, like I said, aren't going to touch this with a 10-foot pole, or the ones that do talk about it, like Kubrick and 2001 and this stuff, they only touch on the surface level stuff, and they don't really delve deeply into the background of the Rosicrucian teachings about it and what's being presented there. What's the true nature of this? So this is all foundational stuff that people are hungry to know about, and they can't really turn anywhere to find out about that unless they go and they read it themselves. And I'll tell you what, after doing this type of research for decades and decades, when you read through some of this Rosicrucian stuff, the Cosmo conception and things like that for the first time, you're just scratching your head. You won't get it. You don't understand it. You have to go through it numerous times and do comparative studies to other of
Mm.
these occult systems that they put forward, and comparative religious studies and all of these things. It's only by putting all that together that you could get an overall picture of it. And this is the thing, it takes years of study and practice to be able to understand some of the fundamentals to it. So I'm doing my utmost to try to present the information that in a digestible way for people so that they could understand what it is that I've uncovered through all of these years of looking at this and have a base understanding. And people are hungry for this, and they do resonate with it. They do sense something. Like, most people can understand or know something's wrong here. They could look at something and say, there's something wrong with this narrative that the media is handing me. There's something there that I can't quite put my finger on. That is a hidden message in there. Something's burning in the kitchen. That's what my friend Crow,
Mm.
uh, from Crow 777 Radio, always says about this concept. Something's burning in the kitchen. I don't know what it is, but I know there's something wrong with that, so I don't trust that information. And that's something that we have that type of intuition about, but we don't know why we have that intuition. Well, I've been trying to put together the pieces as to what we can know, and then we can understand what's wrong with the information they're presenting us. And it almost always has to do with some type of an allusion back to some occult principle like this, usually from the Rosicrucian system here in the Western culture, or from the theosophical standpoint. The theosophists had a lot of sway in the time frame we're talking about here. This is the time frame that Rudolph Steiner brought up. 1841 to 1879 is when he said this battle in the heavenly realms was taking place. That's also the time that we had a major reset here with the occult philosophies and stuff like that, where we had a lot of major intellectual things happening in society, where we had all of this rise of the theosophical society, of all of these occult methodologies and systems, the information coming forward out to the public more and more with this stuff, scientific advances, all of this within that time frame. And it's not a coincidence that it happened at that time. So we may be experiencing something similar today. Maybe there is some type of a battle that took place in these heavenly realms, as Steiner described them, over the course of the past couple of years. And we're seeing real world effects based upon that, because when you understand causation happens first from the spiritual and then manifests in the physical, then you understand there's more to the story than what we're being told. And we could recognize some of this. So something's been happening, and we're seeing some real world things happening now in the physical as a result of that. So it's all a matter of, at the end of the day, where are you going to stand? Are you going to go the spiritual path, or are you going to stick to the physical paradigm? And most people are comfortable with the physical paradigm at this point, because that's what we've been indoctrinated with. That's what science has largely shoved down our throats from the time we were very young. So we have this juxtaposition in which way do we want to go, and it's an individual choice, and that's the good news. You don't have to go along with the program. And most people seem to think, well, we're going to be forced to have to do this if we want to live in this world. That's not how it works. That's not how free will works. That's not how natural law works. You cannot be forced to do anything. It's all an offer. And when you realize it's all an offer and you have a choice in the matter, that's what the empowering part of it is. So you can choose the spiritual path if you want. Not saying it's going to be the most comfortable path. It most certainly isn't. But you can choose it if you so desire to do. Or you could choose to go along to get along. And that's the default position of most people in this world right now, is go along to get along. You see it all through society and culture. They just want to have temporary comfort and feel a sense of security or safety, which there's really no such thing. There's no safety net out there, ladies and gentlemen. There is no safety net. Any safety net you think you have is an illusion. There's no safety net. Let's put it that way. So I know I've talked a lot here, Richard. I want to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts now.
Well, there's so much I want to jump into. There's an image, and I will put this on the video, just over the top here. Now, Elon Musk posted this a while ago. So it's got a fork in the road. It's got the Y at the top. Two, I mean, it couldn't be more blatant. On the left-hand path, which is Grok 4, and there's a little castle with the sun coming up behind it. And I'm sure you've seen this, Wayne. And on the right-hand path is a dungeon, and it looks horrible. It's the same castle list, but there's lighting and everything, and it says Chat GPT, Gemini, and Meta. What they we were talking about earlier is the same path. That's all. You've already forked off the road at that point. They go into the same one. But this is what they're trying to tell you with these little images and everything, that path is. But what they won't tell you is where the little boy's standing with his shorts on, is that you've already gone off kilter. You've already gone off road when you're down that side. They won't tell you that path in itself is an offshoot. What you said there was really fascinating. I wanted to just ask about quickly, is that when you said about the kind of trapped in here, the loop, stuck in this reality, well, we use the word retarded, which just means it hasn't evolved at the same rate as you would expect it to. um you said there'll be people left behind. Now, does that straight away brings to mind the Gnostic concept of being trapped in this reality, circled through the reincarnation loop? Is that Does that have any kind of truth to that, or is that what they're thinking of? Is that what they're implying?
Well, that seems to be the implication from a lot of different occult systems, and the Eastern traditions kind of reflect that. That's what this whole samsara reincarnation cycle thing is about, where you get stuck, and like if you haven't progressed, then you're going to get stuck, and that's essentially one of the things where the occult teachings land with this type of belief. Now they base a lot of things on this notion of reincarnation, and I think that's a misunderstood commodity in and of itself within occultism. But certainly they leverage that in a lot of ways, and they have people believing a lot of ideas that may not necessarily have merit to them based on that. Now, a lot of this does fall back to the Gnostic teachings. This is certainly what the Gnostics believe. They think that it's only through this gnosis idea that they can save themselves from that future and develop their own path and method in this physical reality. And of course, the ultimate fulfillment of that is this transhumanist notion. And you see how it's a difference of perspectives. They see it as being a positive thing, that being stuck in the physical is a positive thing. And this comes from the notion of these spiritual entities, these Ahrimanic influences, as Steiner called them, they want to be able to manifest here. They are jealous of humanity because human beings are special in the grand creation. We are made in the image of God, and therefore we have creative abilities. These beings do not. And that's why they always have to use humans to get things done. That's why they want to try to indwell the human being and perhaps take a portion of that creative force, that creative power, and utilize it to build this world of shells so that they can manifest and live here in the physical. They're jealous of the human beings, and a lot of this has to do with their feelings of being kind of disenfranchised and, well, not in essence what they would call quote unquote real. And this falls back on the very nature of these spiritual realms, the barriers between them that exist, the void, the abyss, as it's called, or the underworld, the land of Nod that we've talked about in the past. This is where these beings are. It's kind of a sub portion of the etheric layer of this reality where they are stuck, and they have this type of consciousness where they have conscious awareness, but they have no means of feeling or expressing or experiencing anything. So they're disconnected from the spiritual, they're disconnected from the physical, and they want to manifest physically so that they can feel something, they can experience something. This is kind of like the ultimate definition of hell, if you really want to look at it. And this is where these essences, these spirits exist, in that type of a place where Tracy Twyman described this really well in her book Clock Shavings, as to what it is that it's like. It's kind of like having an awareness of your existence, but having no means of experiencing anything, feeling anything, doing anything, thinking anything. You're just kind of there, and it's almost like a painful experience because it's like a cold fire permeates your being, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that these essences, they want to escape that type of a destiny and switch places with the human souls so that they can have a physical world experience. And that's why they would like to stay here, because the alternative for them is a type of hell. It's a situation where it's hell. And this is one of the important concepts to keep in mind with this.
So do they my little boy just came in. So but the confusion there though, the point is, and maybe I missed the point, is that the Gnostics see this place, from what I can tell, as a trap that they want to escape, but through knowledge. So is it, I mean, people like David wouldn't, he's obviously not subscribing to the transhumanist part of staying here. They want to, they it's not that they think this is a bad place, but they want to, they see this as a trap. The Gnostics do. So they think through knowledge they can escape this place, but the knowledge that there has been hijacked to create a further trap for them here. So they're not actually seeing this as a place they want to stay. So that's why it kind of gets confusing. But some,
Right.
it was, is that the initial Gnostic teachings, or is that just got
It's
confused along the way?
essentially it's a lot of confusion that goes with this, but essentially what they want to do is build a new reality for themselves out of the shell of this one, thus the world of shells. So that's what their escape plan is. They think they could break the matrix and get out of the simulation.
Mm.
And in so doing, what they're really doing is they're bringing about a situation wherein they're collapsing the spiritual worlds in on this physical world and creating a type of primordial chaos that they intend to ride out to the other side in an arc of safety and emerge on the other side and then create the world they want. And this is what the whole digital realm idea is about. This is what the metaverse ideal is about. This is what all of that's about. They're trying to create this artificial digital reality in which they could be the gods of that place. They could control everything there, and they could experience whatever they want there. And this way they escape karma. They skirt the responsibility of their actions, and they also, from the spiritual perspective, from the side of these spiritual influences that want to manifest here, that keeps them out of that place, out of that realm of unreality of sorts, that spiritual realm in which they exist, the abyss. There's this nexus point from between this world and the next world, or the from between the etheric and the astral. They live in that little place, that barrier, if you will, between that. And they don't like it there because it's kind of a hellish, tormenting type place or of existence, or type of an existence to carry out. So that's why these spirits want to manifest here. And in the meantime, what they do is they try to attach themselves to human beings as much as possible and influence human minds, because it gives them a kind of an escape from that type of unreality in which they exist.
Yep.
So they want to try and manifest here. They want to influence people. Ultimately, they want to indwell the human body and the human being and have full control. Whereas right now, they only have partial influence and control over human thoughts and human minds. And like I said, some of this falls back on the teachings of Rosicrucianism, Gnostic teachings. You could look at it from all across the board, the theosophical belief systems. They all touch on these same type of archetypes or ideas. They just call them different things, and sometimes it's hard to describe. But certainly, we have this reality of spiritual influences that are here, and they are affecting things, and people don't want to acknowledge that. And that's a lot of the problem, because if you don't acknowledge that, then that empowers these spiritual essences all the more to do the things they're doing. And
So would
that's
it
where we are with our scientific paradigm.
so just to end it out, so would a good example of this, a good way of putting it, is that these spirits want to use this reality, this world, as a hallway towards the world they want to create and live in. Almost like they
A
want to pass
right,
through this place.
a conduit. They wanna use it as a shell. They want to use the pieces of this creation to build something new. You see, it falls back on this notion of the great architect of the universe once again. And I don't know, did we discuss this in the past? This notion that the Freemasons and many of these occult fraternities, they believe that the universe just is kind of extant, has always existed, but it existed in this type of primordial chaos where there was no form or anything to it, but it's always existed. But it wasn't until the great architect of the universe came along and made order out of this chaos and began to build things. Thus, they call themselves the builders. And this is what they are attempting to do. They want to devolve this world back into primordial chaos and build anew and be the new gods of their new universe that they want to create. And that's essentially what this all falls back on. So that's what the notion is that goes with this. So to try to explain to people in the best terms what this is. Essentially, the important concepts here to really grasp. First of all, there are spiritual influences here that do exist and are influencing things. And we need to be aware of them, because to ignore that or to disregard that or to think that's silly or nonsensical, that leaves us vulnerable to being manipulated and being steered into this paradigm that we may not necessarily want to go in. So, step one, acknowledge the spiritual side of this. Acknowledge there are spiritual forces here that are influencing things in that direction towards hypermaterialism, that are steering things towards this transhumanist advent, because that gives them what they want, these spiritual essences. And it's not good for humanity at large. Although there will be a portion of humanity that falls in line with that and ultimately meets their destruction at the hands of it. But you don't have to choose it. It's an individual choice. And that's the good news. But step one, recognize that there are spiritual influences behind it. And then step two, choose the spiritual path. And you can avoid that fate. And it might not always be easy to do, to hold the line and to stand firm in your beliefs and in your convictions. But it is necessary that you do that if you want to get past this phase of the evolutionary process, as called by the Rosicrucians, for the human being. And we will wind up the better for it on the other side of it all.
I think I said that maybe the next show we can talk about how to choose the spiritual path. Guys, it's It's been absolutely fascinating, as it always is. Please comment below and please share this. As you say, the information you get here, we won't get anywhere else. Wayne, where can they find your content and support your work?
People could find me at www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. Where could the good people find you, Richard?
Video work iconic.com, and you can find me on X at X again, the Crossroads, WhatsApp Rich, or you can find me on Substack, where I need to I'll be putting a lot more work on there recently. So some may conspire on Substack, or just put Richard Willett in and you'll find me there. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Please share this content. Take care.